Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dropping the Gloves. Tim is here. We have another guest. It's incredible. Three-time Stanley Cup champion. Aaron Ward is here joining us. Aaron, how are you, man?
I'm good. I'm also part of your same alumni tour, apparently.
Oh my gosh, this is an epic alumni where we go around and play these games everywhere. We just played Montreal versus Detroit, and it's sad when you play against someone who you hold in such high esteem, and then you're able to skate around them so easily. And you just look at them and you go, what happened? And that's what happened with me with Aaron Ward. So effortlessly.
I am kind of embarrassed. At some point during that game, I did see your numbers, and you did raise your arms. But again, I'm gonna remind you that on our team we had Mickey Redmond, who was in his early 80s, Red Berenson, who's 85, and my partner happened to be Reed Larson, who I think was also in his 70s. So the Montreal Canadiens team had us in numbers.
You know, excuses are just useless. It was a game, and you lost. You also had Drew Miller and Danny DeKeyser and Dino Ciccarelli, and you.
Dino's in his 60s.
He looks great.
Yeah.
We had David Desharnais, and we had a lot of good young players. Aaron, your mic went out again. Plug her in.
It's back on. I don't know.
We're back in. Yeah. But it was a fun game. We enjoyed it, and then I got to pal around with you, and then I just got your number, and here you are. I milked everything I could out of that game, and you got me on the show. Speaking of bad hockey players, my co-host tonight, Tim, we're talking about.
Are we doing qualifiers for that one?
Is that me? Well, I'm going to preface this. I think we're friends, so take this with a grain of salt. How the heck did you get drafted 5th overall with the stats that you had at University of Michigan, where you had 19 points in a season, and you're getting picked 5th overall?
Hey, we're in college back in the day. You only played 30 games.
It says here 42, 46. So we're already lying now.
Don't let stats get in the way of a good story.
So tell us how, though. I'm honest. I want to know how that happened, because you're before the curve of college guys getting drafted, and you get 5th overall in a very loaded draft.
So that year, essentially, I came from nowhere. So I came from Ottawa, ended up at the University of Michigan. In fact, during training camp, I think there was some question whether or not I was going to be in the lineup. And got out against my first game in Bowling Green, played extremely well, and then scored the next game and seemed to take off from there. But I would tell you that it's a product of the nature of the game back then. We had the power forwards, right? So in the same draft, Lindros is getting drafted. You got big boys in the 90s or the early 90s, late 80s, and you're thinking about how do you counter? And one of my greatest assets was I was a physical defenseman. I loved to make contact. I loved to blow guys up. So I got to college, and my freshman year I was 17 years old, and we're playing against Doug Waite and Jim Dowd, and they're 20-year-olds at Lake State. And I'm blowing up kids at 17 that are 20, 21, 22. So I caught the attention that way. And then I kind of slowly inserted myself into key positions at the University of Michigan. Ended up playing the power play my freshman year, and I don't know. Like I said, there's probably a lot of scouts out of jobs right now for having made that. I mean, Mike Smith. I think Mike Smith was no longer a GM in the National Hockey League after selecting me to Winnipeg in 5th overall.
It's a beautiful thing to be self-aware, because I was thinking the same thing. But you do get picked 5th overall. Teasing, of course. In that draft, you got Lindros. Were you around? I know today the kids go to New York, they go to wherever, and the draft picks are around each other all the time. Essentially, you're doing the media tour, this and that. Back when you got drafted in 91, was that a thing? Like, did you get to be around Eric Lindros and the chaos that surrounded him with the Nordiques and not wanting to play there and all that jazz?
It was the haves and the have-nots. The haves were Lindros, and everybody knew that he was going to go 1st overall. It was a bit of a circus sideshow. Anytime it was covered on TSN or we were present, you could hear the circus music playing, like the three-ring circus music playing, because we were all kind of waiting to find out what was exactly going on. The have-nots were the Falloons, LeChance, I laugh that I say this now, Niedermeyer, myself, and can't remember I think it was Matt Pachuk. The group of us kind of toured around because at that point, San Jose's coming into the league and no one knows what the second overall pick's going to be. And and I think it went Quebec, San Jose, Jersey, Islanders, Winnipeg, I think Van after that.
Philadelphia, Vancouver.
Hey, if you really want self-deprecating humor, I was picked ahead of Peter Forsberg.
I don't want to bring it up.
That's. I mean, there's a lot of failures in the National Hockey League. Don't kid yourself. If you're out there and think one day I want to work in the National Hockey League, some people out there selected me ahead of Forsberg. If they can do it, anybody can do it. But during that time in '91, I would tell you that we were just a sidebar to the greater story, which was what is Lindros going to do. When we got there in Buffalo and constant conversation, it was almost like a group atmosphere amongst the guys that we want to know, is he putting a jersey on? And when he didn't, they gasp, and we're at the old Odd in Buffalo, and it was quite the spectacle. And then inevitably it worked itself out, and like that was kind of a funny draft in its own right, because you knew how good he was. He's a generational player, and then there's the rest of us just kind of looking up, waiting for that process to get done so we can get on with the draft.
But yeah, then you have Scott Niedermayer 2 picks behind him and yourself and Forsberg. So it was a pretty loaded draft. Did you talk to Lindros at all? Because I know Eric, I've done events with him. He's a great guy.
We didn't really at the time. I would tell you he was a bit of an anomaly, right? He was the Generals of the time, and he was playing at levels that I think he was selected for Team Canada at some point. He was all over the place. So he was doing things that we weren't privy to, right? So we're going on back in the day, there was no combine. Right, yeah. So I'll give you an example. Like my combine was Minnesota North Stars had me go to the health facility at University of Michigan. Had a doctor look at me, and instead of calling me fat, they called me well fed, and that was what was down as my preface to my career. So it wasn't as intricate or involved or deep diving as it was. So we didn't really mingle. The guy that was ahead of the curve was Lou Lamoriello. So Lou brought like 6 of us in and put us on a treadmill. It was the first time I ever did a VO2 ever in my career. And it was in '91, and he got all the guys on there, and he went through the process. Like Lou was old school. Like he even took us to like a roadside Italian restaurant. When we walked in, got quiet. Lou walked in. We had Lou's table. We got to the back. Everybody had their back to the wall. We were facing the front door. It was all scripted. It was all perfect. So it was kind of funny. But Lou was a forward thinker back then.
So you would go, and he was the GM of the Devils at the time.
Devils at the time, yeah.
Though that's what you would do. You would go and spend time with all the top GMs like San Jose.
No, that's what I'm saying. When I'm saying that Lou was ahead of the curve, like they didn't send people to come talk to you. They basically waited till you got to the draft, and maybe you had an interview then, but they didn't get out in front of it and try and analyze you as a person and dissect you as what are your character traits, what's your moral fiber, all these things. None of that was taken into account back then. It was only Lou that brought us in and really kind of pulled us apart as people.
Can I jump in, John? I want to ask. So if you're obviously a very good college player, but if they're not coming and scouting you and having those conversations with you, and you're not putting up a ton of points, how are they finding you?
Well, at the University of Michigan, you're talking me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, listen. We had Steve Shields, who was I can't remember if he was drafted by Buffalo, I think.
Yep.
We had a ton of guys getting drafted. Cam Stewart, who's from Elmira, Ontario, was drafted, I think, 3rd round by Boston. This was kind of the first ever, like we had some guys ahead of us in the class before, Pat Neaton, Dave Harlock, Chris Tamer, who played for a long time in the National Hockey League. But our class, we had 11 guys. We had 11 freshmen, highly touted. Dave Oliver, who, lit it up in Edmonton on the power play one year. I think he must have had like 26 power play goals or something like that. We had enough guys that attracted everybody in the National Hockey League. On any given night, the scouting area at Yost Arena was absolutely packed full of teams just watching. And so I would tell you it was actually the opposite. It was easy to get scouted, right? We were at Joe Louis Arena for the GLI, tons of people there. Brian Murray and I knew each other from the Ottawa area. He's from Shawville. Used to talk to him prior to getting drafted. So, I think the league was further along than most. The college hockey was getting well scouted. If that was the thing I always responded to people who criticized me. If you ever want to go pro, why don't you go in the OHL? And I always say that it's the job of the National Hockey League for their scouting staffs to find the people, and they will. It's a pro business.
I like it. Yeah, John?
Well, you get drafted and you go to Winnipeg. Now talk about that because they're a team that is great, but then you don't even play with the team. How does that transition from you getting drafted by Winnipeg to then making your way to the Detroit Red Wings 2 years later?
Mike Smith, if you know Mike Smith, he's a unique individual, and it's not a criticism. He's just got a unique personality. He's very, at the time, he was very Russian-centric. He liked the Euro-style game. So when I got drafted, there was a guy ahead of me that I think he played at Minnesota, last name Mueller or Muller, and he spent a year in Soko Kiev. And that was, in fact, the intent of Winnipeg, was to send me my junior year to go play in the K in Soko Kiev because he believed it helped evolve your game. Huh. So I had a decent relationship with Winnipeg. In fact, Mike Smith once came to my Russian studies lecture, 500 people. He was standing there on the side of the building in the lecture hall. My prof, I remember, stopped the class, asked the gentleman what he was doing, and his words exactly were, checking in on a future employee. And I looked over, and his voice was unmistakable, and I sunk right into that chair in the auditorium. And then Professor Macon knows exactly what's going on, gives me the nod, tells me to get out of class, and Mike Smith takes me for chicken wings. He wanted to go to a chicken wing spot, and he wanted to see if his future player was actually attending class. But where I ended up getting traded was after my junior year. We got eliminated by Paul Kariya in triple overtime against Maine, and I kind of wanted to take off, and Winnipeg wasn't ready to accept me. And as I mentioned before, I had a really good relationship with Brian Murray in Detroit, and that trade was consummated in June, and they called me. They're like, listen, we're going to trade for you, but you got to leave. And I was like, gone already. I'm out. I'm living on $800 in a scholarship check per month. I'm ready to go. So that's how the trade went down. And absolutely, I'm indebted to Brian Murray for having started my career that way.
Because you not forced your way out of Winnipeg, but you said...
I had nothing. I simply made it known after we got eliminated. We were in Milwaukee at the time, and the management and scouting staff were there. And I kind of basically asked them, like, what's the possibility? And it seemed like it wasn't. Yeah. Like they hadn't kind of grasped the idea of whether they were or were not looking for me to leave. And I was hoping to move on and go pro.
Gosh, I'm looking at the draft picks for Winnipeg now over those years. It's Russians, littered with people from Russia. It's incredible.
Sergei Boutin?
Yeah, Sergei Boutin, Boris Mironov, you got Alexander Alexeyev, Artur Orbitov. Every draft, you get like 10 picks.
And that's a Mike Smith characteristic. He loved Russian players.
It's unbelievable. Every draft, over half of them are Russian. Every single draft. It's crazy. Yep. That's before your time. Going over and picking all these Russians. It didn't really work out because they weren't really that good of a team. But I don't want to spend too much time on your history, but you go to Detroit, you win a couple cups. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You go to Carolina, you win a cup there. Is there anything... There's not a lot of guys who win 3 Stanley Cups. Let's be honest. I never won one. I played with guys who chased them around their whole career, and Patty Marleau and Joe Pavelski and Joe Thornton, these types of guys. What is it like to win a cup? Is there any fun stories? Is it just... to me, it's so foreign because I never won anything.
So I would tell you that I showed a clear lack of appreciation and respect for the history of the game because I won it so early. I was in 96. I've been 23. I'm looking around, and if you tell me, like, name the guys in the locker room, there's Lidstrom over my shoulder. I had beside me Konstantinov, Fetisov, Lidstrom, Rouse, Larry Murphy. I mean, that's Hall of Fame row sitting right there. And we haven't even gone down the forwards of the Shanahans, Larionovs, the Yzermans, the Fedorovs. So I was spoiled as a player. And the one thing I said, I will always say about the experience is, I regret that no one sat me down and said, do you realize what you're going through right now? Not just the experience of having won, but absorb more from the guys that are around you. Yeah. Right? So Fetisov have a million lessons to teach. I don't know if my ears were open and my mouth was shut. And so that process of going through and then getting traded to Carolina and then playing them in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2001 and losing them, that was like a bitter pill to swallow, right? I could have been the third. That was the wake-up call for me that I had to kind of evolve as a person and become more of a veteran and more of a team player and look back at the things that were done by the guys that set the standard in that locker room to try and bring to Carolina. And we had a lot of those guys. We had a lot of guys, Ray Whitney was collecting 3 paychecks at the time from Columbus, and I don't even know the other, Detroit and us. We had a lot of guys that had a lot of skill and a lot of experience, and that was one of the greatest assets that we all came together and cumulatively made it so it was like a impenetrable force. Like that locker room was a collection of no-name guys that were doing amazing things. And so in 2006, the process for me was different. I understood and appreciated every element of not just my teammates, but the environment I was in, the challenge, I'm gonna say the shit that goes along with playing in the playoffs, of enduring like concussions and injuries, but those were things that I had to draw back that I didn't absorb in the moment, but I was able to see from my past experiences with those guys in Detroit. So the third Stanley Cup for me was something where I also felt like I was a passenger in Detroit, but I was a contributor in Carolina. Like I was playing top line minutes for Frankie Caberly, and we were a motley crew of guys in the back end, but man, we were good together.
Let me ask you this, because you mentioned you're losing in the Stanley Cup Finals to Detroit in 2004 or 5 or whatever it was.
2001
and 2. 1 and 2. Then you win the Cup 3 years later in 5-6. The 2 years after you guys make the Cup Final and play Detroit, you're atrocious.
Doormat!
Call a spade here. You're not a good hockey team. Paul Maurice is your coach, and then 2 years later they have to fire him because you guys aren't doing well. You bring in Laviolette. How does that happen? How do you go from Stanley Cup Finals and then the next year you don't even make the playoffs?
I'd be a GM right now if I had the answer.
Yeah, it's just an interesting fact, and then the coach gets fired, and then you're on the roll again, then you win the Stanley Cup 2 years later.
I'll tell you what it is.
Trajectory.
I'll give you my analysis of them, because those were 2 painful years. We thought we had it figured out. That we had gone to the Stanley Cup Finals. We had we'd slayed the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time, which we thought they thought they were almost planning a parade down Yonge Street, because they're looking at the Carolina Hurricanes and they're going to come up against against the Detroit Red Wings. And in the past, Toronto's had a pretty good history against Detroit in the playoffs. So we got to 2000, the following year, and we didn't change much, and we rested on our laurels in some capacity. And what we became was the doormat of the National Hockey League. We got beat every single night. I mean, threats abound. There's funny stories about like Jimmy Rutherford coming in and threatening to trade the entire team in Atlanta. We were losing to Atlanta. And then, so we come back. We're down 3-2 in the third. We come back. Jeff O'Neill throws a puck to the slot in overtime. I put it in, and you can hear on the microphone, Jeff O'Neill says, "Fuck you, Jimmy. You can't trade us all now." And it gets picked up. So not only is Jimmy already pissed off in the third period, now he's getting chirped by his teams. And listen, I love Jimmy Rutherford, but I remember those stories of that's how bad it was back then. It was just like, if you could eke out any positivity at any capacity in your season, you just take it.
Oh, it's hilarious. But then how do you regroup? Was it the coaching change that helped? Because the GM didn't change. Rutherford was still there. You bring in Peter Laviolette. Was that the thing that spurred it on?
Lavi brought in a different mentality. Hell, he sat me down. I remember at the end of the season going into the lockout, and Lavi looked at me, and I'm 24. I'm almost 30, I think. Yeah. No, I'm 30. I'm 31. And he tells me I got to change my game. Like, I'm pretty stuck in my ways. He's like, You cannot come back here and play at 227 pounds. You got to be under 215. I think he gave me 212. I'm thinking, I haven't seen 212 since I was 17 years old.
Lavi, I'm well fed.
Right, and well fed. Ask the Minnesota North Stars from old. So I made the commitment, but he went around the team before we left during the lockout, and he basically mandated for every guy what they had to change about themselves. And then he instituted a philosophy that I will, to this day, even though I'm 52 years old, if Lavi says to me, "Put your head through that wall and you'll find success," I believe him. I'll put my head through the wall. That's the type of coach he was. And that's why people sometimes question, why does he have a lifeline? Like, Torch just got fired. Guys like that have a shelf life. Lavi's not a shelf life guy. Sometimes, like, he runs into Dry Island in Philly. It's not his doing. Sometimes the circumstance doesn't resonate between players and coach. But overall, that guy adopts a philosophy with his players where you truly and firmly believe he cares about you as a being and as a person, and it's why you play for him.
Interesting. So you go and you win the Stanley Cup. I want to know what Rod the Bod was like. He's the coach of the Hurricanes right now. Was he as intense as he seems to be behind the bench? We'll get to the Hurricanes in a second, the current team, but just talk about that team, because Brind'Amour obviously has had his hands all over the Hurricanes now for the last 10 years. Was he as crazy as he is now?
So I'll give Roddy credit. I think that's the year. So we transitioned from
All right, mic's out again, Aaron. Hold on.
You're good.
Can't hear me now?
All right. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So we transitioned from Ronnie Francis. Ronnie got traded to Toronto, and then Roddy assumed the role as the captain. And one of the things Roddy had to do was change a little bit about who he was, because you can be an assistant captain and take care of. Sorry, we got an Italian Mastiff about to get on the couch behind me. You can change things about yourself, but you have to remain true to yourself, because your team's watching. They're going to believe or judge the type of person you are and how you present yourself when you go from assistant captain to captain. And Roddy is the ultimate competitor, because he will always set the example, no matter what, off the ice, on the ice. He'll do whatever it takes. And the crazy part about him was, one of the moments we realized in the Stanley Cup season that we were headed in the right direction is Roddy had to let go of some of his values. Like, Roddy doesn't go to the bar. But we were going through a slump. We were shit. And we were on like a 3 or 4 game slide, and we were not even involved. We couldn't get it together. And the most surprising thing happens. We pull into Atlanta, and Roddy Brind'Amour stands on the front of the bus and says, "We're all going to the bar." I would tell you that we cured cancer before Roddy invited our team to go to the bar. Like, that was unheard of. So here we are, collectively, like, okay, he's seeing where there's a need on his team. He's assessing and evaluating what we need in this moment, and he's going outside of his comfort zone. Love it. And sure enough, I mean, it was Atlanta, so it wasn't too hard to right the ship. But after that, we just started ringing them off, and we came into it. So Roddy is who he presents himself to be. To the core, he is almost a perfect human being.
Wow, that's some high praise. So fast forward to the Stanley Cup and Rod Brind'Amour being a perfect human being. Where do you want to take it from here, Tim? Because that's a pretty wild statement.
Well, before we get to the current Canes, I want to ask a couple more questions about your career, and starting with Boston. I'm a Bruins fan, and so it was great to watch you play there, and I have two questions about that. The first is playing with Chara. I mean, you're playing with basically him in his prime. You played a ton of minutes together, a lot of situations, a lot of hard minutes. Like, what was it like playing with him? How did you guys communicate with each other? How did he make you a better player? Oh, we lost you again, Aaron.
There you go. It's back. If you know my nature and you know Z's nature, we are yin and yang. We are total polar opposites. I'm all about the good time. I'm planning stuff out. And Z back in the day was pretty frugal and worried about his calorie intake and probably catching a workout at the hotel. We were not two ships passing in the night. We were not on the same wavelength. And I think that actually in some capacity worked out well for us. Like, he made me focus, and I became I had a horrible 5 months in New York. I got traded from New York because I was just not a fit for the system. I get to Boston, and I realized Boston's my city. Like, that city is what I'm about. I love it. I want to embrace it. I want to live it. I want to absorb it. And the game on the ice, we went from being the most disrespected pro team, as we should have been, to all of a sudden a storyline in Boston, and we matter. And that was so fun. And playing with Z, I had to understand that I was a complementary piece to him. And I had to understand his game, because he wants the puck all the time. He wants to influence the game. The game wants to be directed through him. And I had to understand that. Funniest stories I'd tell you is, like, you know, I'm a little distracted sometimes. Z used to lose his mind on me. We line up at a face-off, and I might be checking out who's in the front row, or I might be joking with a guy beside me, and Z's trying to give me a signal off the face-off. He's like, he had these signals, like, if he clenched his stick, it was hard around. If his head bobbed back, it was a reverse. All of it. Well, if I didn't catch the signal, I was catching some mean guff on the bench. He would lose his mind on me, but the ADD would kick in, and then I'd be off in some other place. But Boston itself was an absolutely amazing experience. Just to be in a pro town like that and to be part of the evolution of mattering again in town and people paying attention to Bruins hockey. And as you mentioned, I do feel like some of the most fun is watching Z play as his partner. And the year he won the Norris, like he joked with me, he's like, "Hey, you're a Norris. You're my partner for the Norris." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not sure I did a lot of contributing there." But I will tell you, the only times in my hockey career where I was like scared on the ice, not for myself, but for safety, I saw Z fight. And I was there for the first fight where he fought Kochi, who was in Chicago. I have never seen an app. I thought it was WWE and someone had razors in their pockets because Kochi came out. He was bald at the time. His whole head was covered in blood. And Z's fist hitting that face will never leave me. That sound will never leave me. I was like, okay, you don't mess with him. I understand now.
Well, you came at such an interesting time because 2 years before you're there is when they bring in Chara and Savard and basically start to rebuild their franchise out of obscurity. And 2 years after you left, they win the Cup. So you're right in that transition phase. What did you see? How did you see that organization and the culture develop into a winning culture over your time?
So Louis, who was my assistant coach in Detroit, was who I had for the last part of my season, and then they moved on to Claude Julien. Claude was pretty much a my way or the highway guy, but I would tell you part of the process of winning was there was an influence of the players, and I think I had some influence on them of getting them to relax, to allow the players to understand the situation in the moment and let them try and handle it and step in when it's needed. It was interesting seeing the players like, Phil. There's like a process of guys learning to be pros, right? I was in the locker room when we were playing Carolina in 2009, and Mark Recchi's there trying to piss out a kidney stone the size of Texas, and we're having to convince Phil that the labral tear he has is the same thing everybody has, and we're all going to play through it. There was the process of everybody learning, and I think that's the greatest thing that happened during those years is we learned to be professional. We learned to represent the logo on the jersey appropriately. We were gravitating back towards the big bad bees with the amount of toughness we had in the team and the skill sets that we had amongst the team. So that for me was probably the most fun I had playing hockey and not winning something.
So, championship culture, you've been around it, you've seen it. Current Carolina Hurricanes. 2 years ago, conference finals, you felt like they were going to take the next step. Fast forward to now, Aaron, and it's just question marks surrounding this franchise. They've obviously gone after it. They brought in Jake Guentzel last year to try to get him over the hump. Bringing Rantanen this year with that whole circus. You mentioned Eric Lindros. The Rantanen thing couldn't have been a bigger circus than how it ended up. Not for lack of trying for the Hurricanes, but what is going on in Carolina? You're there, you're around the team, you're around the organization. How are they coping with what happened this season?
Okay, so the stories, as I understand it, with the Guentzel situation is Guentzel was more likely to stay here. It's just they didn't, in a timely manner, offer the money to him that was due. And when Tampa comes, offer similar money, and you got to remind yourself there's no income tax here in Florida. Of course you're jumping. But I would say that evaluation-wise, as a former player, having watched this team play the style they do, I feel like Guentzel, anyways, was a better fit than Rantanen. Rantanen, for me, I think, was a flyer. And the truth is, I think it was doomed from the get-go. And I understand why you make it, because you only have so many opportunities over the course of a franchise's existence to bring in star players. I don't know if the style that Roddy has for this group ever would have fit Rantanen long-term. Rantanen, to me, is a guy that wants to puck possess across the blue, bring it across, try to make a play off the rush. The Carolina Hurricanes forever have been the team that dumps the puck in, and they are top two in the past few years in ozone dump-ins, top two in dump-in retrievals, top two in generating offense off of those retrievals. That's a style. and you have to fit that style.
Ranton is a rush guy. And
Ranton's a rush guy. So listen, I don't think everybody's so critical of the move. I give people kudos for taking a flyer and taking a chance. It could have all of a sudden resonated with Rantanen. 5 games in, like, oh my God, the style works. Oh my God, my buddy Aho, who's a fellow Finn, I might like it here. So we get the truth later. That's the nature of the business. So I think they, in fact, did a good job of turning over what they have. And let's be honest, Carolina is not built like some of the powerhouse National Hockey League teams. They have their Ahos, they have their Svechnikovs, but they're an analytics-driven team, and they look at the numbers that relate to certain players, and if a guy has priced himself out, potentially, from their team, they will then go to the numbers and try and find a like player. So I'll use the analytics version of it, the archetype of a player. Does he have similar skills? Does he have similar attributes? Will he fit the system much like this guy? Are they very similar players? And if so, where does he fall on the salary cap scale? And they're adept. They're very skilled at doing this. So I think sometimes they rely on that more than going out and blowing the doors off. This is not a New York, Chicago, Toronto market where you're going to spend all that money. They're pretty smart with how they do it. They're frugal. It'll be interesting. I think that Dundon's an incredibly competitive owner. How long it is before he gets influenced by wanting to win so bad where maybe his cap, his self-imposed cap, maybe inches up higher. So from a team perspective on this group, they have a lot of talent. I, in fact, didn't think they were going to survive losing Mason, Shea, Pesce, and Teravainen, right? And I'll tell you that the guy I think they missed the most, or the two guys, Shea and Teravainen, because, I mean, their power play right now is their biggest Achilles heel. It's 8th worst in the National Hockey League. So, but overall, the fact that they are competitive, I mean, they hiccuped against Nashville was inexplicable how that happened. But, I mean, they're 8-2-0 in the last 10. They're going to go into the playoffs, and I think they're going to run into the same questions that they have had for the last 5-6 years. Will your goaltending be sufficient to get you through? And in the years past, when they lost to Boston, when you have Mrazek back there, the answer is no. When you got Reimer back there, answer is no. You hope with the experience of Kochetkov and Anderson this year gets them through. But then you also look at the youth on this team. Like, you got Blake, who's got not a lot of like reps in the playoffs. You've got young guys. So there's a lot of questions going into the playoffs. I think their style fits. Like, when it gets mucked up in the playoffs, I think that dump and chase is to their benefit because they know how to play it. Defensively, I mean, losing Pesce and losing Shea, bringing in Gostisbehere. Who else do we have? That Walker. Walker's another guy that fits the system. He was only behind Makar last year in defenseman leading the rush. So they do their research, they do their homework, and figuring out how to construct this team. I'm not firmly on board with them making noise in the playoffs, but I think they have potential to be competitive.
Competitive, yeah. No, I agree. They have a really good team, but when they stack up against, I think the one thing that sets Carolina apart and what they were trying to address is that superstar who can do it when you need it to be done. You know, you need that Kucherov. You need that McDavid. You need that McKinnon. They've been searching for that, and I think that's still something they search for. But at the end of the day, you have to start figuring out, why aren't we winning? We bring in a Gensel, we bring in a Ranton, and now we have a Stankoven who's a good third-line piece, maybe more down the road, but...
I love Stankoven. I believe Stankoven has found a system and a coach that's going to make his career speed up in terms of success.
That leads into my question. How long is Brind'Amour's shelf life? Because he's been there for a long time. He's the coach. He gets the most out of these players. But at some point, if you're the owner, you go, I'm trying to win a cup here. Like, maybe you've taken this team as far as you can.
Well, let's be honest. Salary cap's going up $7.5 million next year. It's going up $8.5 million the next year. And it's going $9.5 million the next year. I firmly believe that we're going to have the most volatile offseason coming into player offer sheets because people are going to have money and they're going to start looking. I mean, no greater example than what St. Louis did to Edmonton. Should it be an endorsement for other teams around the National Hockey League to start looking now and figure out where you can fill the gaps? And if a team is up against the cap, pick the carcass. Like, it's a business. Take care of your team. No feelings considered. Do what you have to do. And I think that's maybe where this team here in Carolina might have to take a look at it. You talk about the shelf life of Roddy. Here's the truth. He's not a recycled coach. All right? So yep. Roddy has the attention. If you talk to the guys in the locker room and you give them a truth serum, much like I just told you, Lavi, I'd put my head through the wall if you told me I was going to have success, that is the same mentality that Roddy has adopted from Laviolette and instilled in his locker room now. Guys firmly believe him. They want to play for him. So players stop playing for a coach when they realize it's imminent. The shoe's going to drop and it's time for the guy to go. We're not there with Roddy. Roddy's got an organization consistently in the top 3 in his division, top 4 usually in the conference, and I can guarantee you that there's probably 22 other organizations right now around the National Hockey League would kill for that production in a season. So he's clearly safe. I understand maybe at some point there's a come to Jesus moment between Dundon and Roddy about where we really need to go. I don't know how much Roddy was involved in the Gensel situation in a timely manner. I think he kind of got involved at the back end when it was too late. And I don't know how much he was consulted on the Rantanen situation. But Roddy's safe, and Roddy resonates. As long as a coach resonates with his locker room, he's going to be there.
Okay.
Well, one of the we all saw the Four Nations Cup last month, and one of the major takeaways from that was that the whole world got to see what Canes fans already knew and how good Jacob Slavin was. Like, how do you rank him among the top NHL defensemen? Because most of the other guys that you put in that top category put up a lot of points, and he doesn't. Is that going to hurt him in terms of rankings?
No, it's funny. If you talk to former players, talk to current players, and they evaluate Slavin. Slavin's got that, and I'm not comparing the offensive clearly. He's got that Nick Lidstrom-esque component to him. He's a flow killer. And when I mean he's a flow killer, it looks effortless. I remember I used to watch Nick from the bench often because he was eating up all the minutes. But I could never figure out like his stick positioning and where his head was and how he's always composed and his posture on the ice. And you would have like Mike McDonald coming down the ice and boop, just pop the puck off his stick. It's a skill set that is acquired over time that so very few have. Slavin has it. There's a read component to being a defenseman that Slavin has on steroids. And I would say that it's almost harder now. Like, there's not a chance I can play in the modern day National Hockey League. 2 reasons. Defensemen are asked to control the puck on a level and possess the puck on a level for longer in areas of danger than you would ever trust me to have the puck. 2, the skill set and speed of the players and the speed of the actual game is on steroids. It is so fast that in processing and evaluating the game, it's easy for defensemen in the 90s. Not a lot of guys are moving. I could see this guy coming off the wing, this guy coming off the wing. I could almost predict where the puck's about to go. Nowadays, these guys can stick the puck up your rear end or go around you or dish it in the passes. Like, I saw a pass yesterday in the neutral zone. Someone's throwing it off the back of his legs to a guy in the neutral because he had 2 guys in the passing lane. Never unheard of in our era. So Slavin is able to do against higher caliber players what most can't. And I think what you saw in Four Nations is he has an engine that doesn't stop. He's got a size that doesn't work against him. A lot of guys that are 6'3", 6'5", they have a little gangly effect to the game. Not him. He's in full control of his body. And he's got a read component and a smartness to his game that very few have. So Slavin, I don't think he's going to ever be discounted for the fact that he doesn't put up the numbers that maybe the Makars do or whoever you want to put up there. He's got the full respect because people who firmly understand the game understand the effect he has in the game. He affects the game. He doesn't go out and just play the game. He dictates a lot of times by how he is positioned and what he does with the puck in a manner that most can't.
I like it. The last one is I want to ask about Burns. Where do you see from him at this point in his career? Because he's been around forever. He's done it all. But is he still near the top of his game, or is he going to come off a little bit?
Well, I think you can look at the last question we had about Boston and Chara and I. Like, you don't have to be the fastest guy if the guy to your left is, in fact, one of the most impactful guys in the game. Burns is smart. I don't think he's slowed down as much as everybody has said he has, but at 40, it's natural. Your body starts to deteriorate. And at that point, you have to be a headsy defenseman. And I think that's what Burns is. He's physical. He can still get there. And if he plays a complementary piece as the second twin tower on the top pairing in Carolina, then good on him. I think that the people who throw the criticism his way, I think sometimes it's, I say more often than not, misdirected.
Okay, so John, we'll wrap up with some rapid fire questions for you, Aaron. Just a few here. One of them we already talked about Chara, so let's give a different answer. The best D partner of your career, your favorite one to play with.
Frankie Caberly. So
Nice.
Frankie, again, we were a motley crew. I challenge anybody to name the sixth defenseman back in 2006. You can't. We were like no-name crew, but our D-core was utterly amazing, and Frankie wouldn't say shit if his mouth was full of it. Like, I barely get him to talk on the ice. Me, I've never seen a microphone I don't like. You know, mine was breaking at times, probably from overuse. But Frankie is like the most undervalued, underrespected, quiet, impactful defenseman that I played with.
That's great. Who was the hardest player to shut down over the course of your career?
Oh, it'd be Forsberg. In fact, I got a funny story. So when I was in Detroit, we're playing at the old arena in Denver, and we were doing matchups, and Scotty's on his matchups. And all of a sudden, Dave Lewis tells me to go on the ice, and I hop out there, and then Forsberg comes out, and I hear Scotty. I'm not even that far from the bench. Dave, what the fuck are you doing, Dave? You trying to make us lose the game? Now, in that split second, I made a career decision. Do I stay out here and get scored on, or do I loop back and change because I heard Scotty does not want me on the ice? So I got off. But for me, Forsberg was a combination of physicality and force that it was on par with his skill. Like, his reverse hits knocked the wind out of you all the time, and he was able to puck protect, much like the guys do now. It's nuts. Decided to take you wide, beat you in a corner. That guy was, for me, everybody wants to say maybe, Lindros, the giant guys, but Forsberg had the escapability that those guys didn't.
What was the most memorable goal that you scored?
Game 7, first goal, Stanley Cup. It was like a diffuser for me. I had gotten knocked out by Rafi Torres in Game 5, and they wouldn't let me play the first period, second period. I had to tell them. That was my test back then. Tell me who hit you. And I kept saying Pisani, because the only name I could remember was Pisani because he'd been scoring a ton in the playoffs. And they're like, no. So finally, when they turned their back, I wrote Rafi Torres' name inside my finger so I could remember it when they asked the question. So come the third period, I made it back out there because I looked at my finger. I said, Rafi Torres. They're like, all right, you can go out there. I don't remember the third period. I do not remember overtime. I remember the video of the giveaway. But that for me was like the self. I know what I went through to get back to play. I didn't feel great in Edmonton. In fact, Ryan Smith walked me on a one-on-one, which was a career highlight for him. It was ugly. But I got myself back in condition enough in Game 7, both mentally and physically, to have an impact in the game, and that for me is best goal, best moment in my life.
All right, last question. What's the most memorable fight that you'd had?
Actually, anniversary was 2 days ago. So we had the brawl against Colorado in 96, 97. And I drove to the rink with McCarty and Draper every single day. We lived in the neighborhood. And Mac would drive his Lincoln Navigator. Drapes was sitting in the front seat, and I looked like Spike, that little like Chihuahua that jumped around the bulldog because I was younger, and like I just had to sit there quiet and shut up. But at no point when the radio's playing or conversation's going have they shared with me that there's a plan to go get Lemieux tonight. So game goes, all of a sudden Mac does what he does. I lean over, I look down, and I see the Comerica sign covered in blood, and my first reaction is, oh shit, this is what they've talked about. This is like 70s hockey.
It's happening.
It's happening. Here we go. So Jamie Pusher fights Severin. That series of fights happened, fight after fight after fight. So we get out in the second period, and I line up with Larry Murphy, and I look over, and I'm like, I got Thomas Holmstrom I've never seen fight. Mike Knubel's playing his first ever NHL game, and this is the game. I can't remember who's at center. Severin hits Larry Murphy from behind. I go grab Severin. I get a good jump. I've got his jersey. Now, I know he's a skilled fighter because I'm way outside my weight class. I'm going to try and go tactical. So I go to pull his jersey in and grab. Off it comes. He's taking off his shoulder pads, his elbow pads. It's not tied down. I'm holding his jersey, and I'm eating his fist at that point. So now I'm looking at him, and I think he's even gone between periods and shaved his chest because there's no chest hairs to grab. So I count the black flashes, like 1, 2, it's hit. Now I'm like, okay, like this has got to end. So finally, I get him by the back of the neck and grab his pants, and I remember Dvorsky come in, and he's yelling at us. I'm not really exactly sure what he's yelling. And Severin's getting ready to kill me again. He's going to line up another punch. And Dvorsky says, one more punch, and you guys are both done, gone from the game. And you can see on video, I go, yeah, quit hitting me. Just like 3 days, I couldn't get my helmet on my head. I was beat to a pulp. That was my most memorable fight, but here's the truth. By definition, a fight means I have to throw a punch. I don't think I really got one off.
Was that an incredible rivalry? We had Mac on a while back, and he talked about it a little bit, but how fun was that playing in those games as a young kid? Like, that's got to be incredible.
So, 95, 96, I watched it, right? And I made the team in 96, 97, and our first game, in fact, was in Colorado.
Oof.
And we were expecting something to happen there from their perspective. So, in the second period, I hit Rene Corbet along the boards, knock him out cold, bleeding down the side of his mouth. And I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, I've really started it now, and that was not my intention. I just can be physical. 2 shifts later, Marty Lapointe hits Gusarov. Gusarov swallows his tongue on the ice, and he's carted off the ice. So I'm thinking it's all going down there. That rivalry taught me to get life and games in perspective. Because if you want to feel anxiety on a true, like, heightened level, go into a game like that not knowing what to anticipate. That taught me what rivalry hockey was.
How many suspensions would be handed out if that game was played?
Oh, God! Okay, so the fact that Mac was still in the game after kneeing Lemieux off the boards,
yeah.
Okay, there's one there. Goalies fought. That would have been gone. I mean, there was so many third guy in, fourth guy in, all of that. The hits were high. Like, I remember we were trying to impose maximum damage, both teams. So when you would hit, you'd launch. I remember back in the day, Eric Lacroix played for Colorado. Anytime he was on the ice, he was a foot airborne when he was throwing a hit, and so we were returning it like it was crazy. And the funny part was it carried over in the playoffs. So we had brawls in the playoffs. I fought Sylvain Lefebvre in the playoffs. We had like fight after fight. Where I think now people they value what's going on a little bit more. You know, they're trying to play the game more in the playoffs now.
It's just good hockey, Tim. Like that's what people loved about that era. I think we've obviously lost it, and we're trying to reclaim it a little bit. But how you must look back and go, just man, thank goodness I was in those games. That's the best rivalry ever. I think in hockey.
Stories. The best part is it's the same thing. When you talk about winning a Stanley Cup, the memories can never be taken from you. A collective group of people remember the same situation. Same with the fights. Same with you went to war with your guys, and you didn't necessarily win, but you took your pound of flesh. And it was fun. And you'd sit back after there. I mean, back in the day where there was pizza and beer sitting in the locker room, these guys weren't eating like protein shakes and, watching their diet. Like Joey Koster had like 7 pizzas sitting in the room before we got undressed, and there was beer flowing everywhere. Those were the moments that, I mean, as you step away from the game, the hardest part for a former player is feeling like you don't belong anymore. You can't, no one can relate to what you went through except for those guys. So when you miss the competitiveness, you miss the camaraderie, and you miss the storytelling, that's where guys, when they step away from the game, they struggle the most. And I would tell you, same for me. Like, I miss, to the point where I created an alumni skate with our Carolina Hurricanes here just so we get together once a week and rip on each other and feel like it's not you don't like me. It's in fact you love me that you're making fun of like my waistline from when I was 27 years old. Have at it.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Anything else, Tim?
No, this has been great. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, Aaron, I could talk to you forever, and hopefully I catch you around the way at another event. You're one of the best, man. I appreciate you coming on, and all the best in the future. And check him out in Montreal on that radio station, and probably everywhere else. This guy's top notch.
I'll do something about getting this mic fixed.
Oh, it's fine. You're doing fine. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.